I'm sure you have to be strategic in your day to day as a seller. So I thought we would go over one of our new features at Pod, Meeting Brief, and how you use it with your clients. How does that sound?
Yeah, for sure. I love the meeting brief feature.
Tell us a little bit about how you use Meeting Brief in your day to day.
Yeah, I think maybe to answer that, it's important to go back to a time before meeting brief existed in my day to day. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd often spend, depending on the size and scale of the deal, upwards of an hour and a half on just research and prep for an important meeting. So what the meeting brief tool has allowed me to do is save a ton of that time and dedicate it to selling more, whatever that selling motion is. More meetings in my calendar, more prospecting, more content creation. And it's been amazing to have that time back because instead of scouring Google and Facebook and LinkedIn for 2 hours and my email records and all of my call transcripts in Gong, I'm able to
Mm-hmm.
basically just get a really quick synthesis in pod of what I should be bringing up in the
Yeah.
context of the deal, but also like what might be helpful to ask people about at the beginning of the call when we go around kind of just shooting the shit.
That's great. I love that. Perfect. You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask you what your old approach was, but to hear that you were spending an hour and a half before each call, that really compounds throughout the weeks and the quarter, hey?
Definitely, yeah. There's like that stat that goes around that sellers only spend 30% of their time selling. And
Yeah.
it's a skewed stat because I think that all of these things are part of selling and contribute to that motion. But it's true that you're not actively engaging with prospects and customers. You're
Mhm.
spending 2 hours researching. And for context, with Meeting Brief, I'm able to spend like 5 to 10 minutes just sort of reading through that stuff. And it makes me aware of all of that kind of on the fly right away.
Amazing. I love that. And how would you say unpreparedness affects your pipeline? Like, do you think you can kind of be unprepared, but make it up later down in the deal process? Or do you think that it impacts things a little more strongly, or thoughts there?
Yeah. I think probably a lot of sellers would agree with me that we give ourselves a lot of credit for being able to like wing things and figure things
Yep.
out on the fly. It's an important skill, but I think all of those same people would agree when I said it's always better to be prepared. As sellers, we maintain so much less control over the entire process. People are going away, consulting with their buying committee. They're speaking
Yep.
about us constantly, and we have no power over those interactions. And so when we do have sort of control, or at least a little bit more control in those call environments, you have all of your buyers, you have everyone who would need to be on that call from IT, from ops, whatever that looks like, whatever your buying committee kind of makeup is.
Mhm.
You want to make the most of that hour or that 30 minutes, and coming prepared is just the best way to do that. And so this
Yeah.
has been a super helpful feature for me.
Great. I love that. And yeah, that's a great point. I read a stat the other day that said that the majority of buyers on sales calls would say that the seller is coming to the call unprepared. And I think sometimes sellers need all the help they can get, especially when those audiences do get 3 to 5 to 7 people on the call.
Totally.
Which pod functionality do you also think has been the most impactful for you as a seller?
Deal prioritization, although it's like sort of one of our kind of bread and butter features at this point, has been
Mm-hmm.
really refreshing for me. I think not because it allows you to tackle your deals that are most likely to close most quickly. And in other environments I've worked in, we've always sort of referred to that stuff as low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Um, but not having to sort of hem and haw over what that actually is and having a data-driven recommendation made has made going after the right things easier. And of course, we all want to close as much as we can as quickly as possible. That's the name of the game as sellers. But I think I spent a lot of my time as a seller not feeling that confident in the power of AI because I've
Mm-hmm.
seen things like, for example, not to throw anyone under the bus, lead scoring in certain CRM tools
Mm-hmm.
that was totally inaccurate. And I could just look at it and say, why is it saying this lead that told me they were not interested or had no budget for 8 months is a super hot lead? I don't know where it's getting that data from. Whereas every time Pod has made a recommendation about which deal I should be prioritizing, who needs an extra call or an extra follow-up or who's maybe ready to go sooner than the anticipated close date, it's
Yeah.
always, or I shouldn't say always, it's largely accurate. And that's been super exciting because it's kind of restored my faith in the power of AI to make those types of recommendations.
It's been Pod's bread and butter for a reason, right?
Totally, 100%. And I mean, who doesn't want to know where to spend their time, right? It's,
Yeah, and just my last question was there anything else you wanted to add about meeting brief or pod in general?
I mean, I guess what I would say is AI is a buzzword at this point, and
Mhm.
working at Pod, I was super excited to get into this space, and have since realized sort of how crowded it is, but also as someone who's not necessarily on the product side and who's not super tech savvy,
Mhm.
I didn't realize that it's actually technology that's been around for a really long time. So obviously
Mhm.
LLMs have come a long way recently and are a little bit newer, but there's like machine learning technologies that have been employed in software that we've been using for years and years and years. So it's
Mhm.
tried and tested. Like it's not coming out of nowhere, and there is historical data to back up that this stuff works. It's you and your data, and the only way to see if it works for you in the context that you work in is to give it a try. Um,
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and taking us through what meeting brief and pod looks like for you in your day to day as a seller. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Mariah. Great to see you.
Thanks. Likewise. Bye bye.